is SpawnCampGames, and today we're going to show you 50 plus Unity tips and tricks. Shortcuts in Unity are super important, and you'll be using these a lot, so just remember these coordinate with the top left section of your keyboard. So you start with Q, and you have Q, W, E, R, T, and Y. So W and E, you rotate and move, pretty simple. Another one that you'll probably use a lot is the pivot and your local rotation. These are mapped to Z and X. That one's pretty simple also. Use Control A to select everything in your scene. In Unity, you can use Alt-click to expand and collapse game objects. You can also do the same thing to the root to see all the objects in the scene. Another set of handy shortcuts is this toolbar up here. You can remember that Control P will play your scene, Control Shift P pauses your scene, and Control P while played will stop your scene. Making a lot of game objects can be frustrating, but just remember that Control Shift N makes a new game object. Alt Shift N will make a new child of that game object. To get multiple game objects in the same location, you can hold Control, select them all, just drag. Let's say we have this massive rigid body container. At the very bottom we have these special rigid bodies that we want at the top. Instead of grabbing them all and doing this shimmy all the way to the top, what we can do instead is go to the bottom. We can grab them all. We can hit Control X to cut, go all the way back to the top. We can collapse this. Let's go anywhere outside the rigid bodies, hit paste. Now we can drag these above the rigid bodies, open the rigid bodies back up, select them all, drop them in at the very top. In Unity, you can use empty game objects to help organize and hide game objects in your hierarchy to make it look much cleaner. You can also create empties, and you can rename these to nothing, and you can use these to sort out your hierarchy. If you have an empty object anywhere in your scene and it's hard for you to find, what you can do is go up here, select a icon, and then if you have Gizmos enabled, you can see that icon. We have all these elements over here, and we need a parent to these elements. Instead of creating a parent, dragging these in and resetting all the transforms, we can just simply find like the centermost object. We can create an empty. It's going to set the position exactly where this cube is. So now we can drag it out, and then we can select all these and drag it in. And just like that, we have a parent exactly where we need it in our game world. Say we have all these spheres and we want to rename them all to starting sphere. Instead of going to rename, or better yet, even if we hit F2, say starting sphere 1, we hit F2, starting sphere 2, there's a better way. So instead we just select them all, go over here, type in starting sphere, hit enter, and then now it'll be a lot easier to name these what we want. If you're using prefabs, if you drag a prefab in and you want to edit your prefab, sometimes it's hard to do, especially if made up of nested prefabs. So what I like to do is as soon as I drag it in, go to the root and go to unpack prefab completely. Then I can make my changes that I need to make. I can take my car and then make it a prefab again. Control Shift F will move an object to where the scene view is. This works especially well for cameras. So I can line this shot up. I can click my camera, Control Shift F, and like that our camera is set exactly where we were. It can sometimes be hard to place game objects where you need them to be, but if you use the middle mouse button and click where you want it, now when you create your new object, it's going to be exactly where you need it. Most people know about flying around in Unity, It's a good way to get around the scene, and if you hold the right mouse button and use the scroll wheel, you can even control how fast you move. But sometimes there's even a faster way. Like if I wanted to get on the back side of this tavern here, I could just make sure the tavern's selected. I could do a 180 with my camera, hit F, and now I'm behind the tavern. If I wanted to get down here, I could hit F. Now if I wanted on the back side, I could spin around real quick, hit F, and there I am. Sometimes this is just a super easy way to get around. Most people know that you can have multiple layouts in Unity, but one good way to use these layouts is to have them specific for what you're doing. So here, I've went ahead and created a layout called animation. So when I open this layout, I have my animation set up and ready to work. If you have elements from another scene that you want to drag into your current scene, an easy way to do this is to open the new scene alongside your current scene, and then you can extract anything you need to out of this scene into your new scene. And then we can just remove this old scene, make sure not to save it. And just like that, we have our car and our new scene. And just like us having two scenes open, we can also have two instances of Unity open. So we could go to Open Project, and just choose a project. And once that's open, we can get these side by side. We can take this entire folder here, drag it into our new project, and just like that, we have prefabs from one scene, one project to another scene in another project. In Unity, if you pop out a window, it will be visible on top of everything when you go into maximize play mode. This helps with debugging. You can also do this with the inspector to see your values changing. If you're in Unity and you're in maximize mode and you want to see something happen in your debugs or something, you can always go to pause, untick the maximize, and then when you go to resume, you'll be in minimized mode. For triggers and whatnot, instead of creating an empty and then editing your trigger like this, what I prefer to do is just create a cube. You can scale this cube, and while it's still visible, you can get a sense of what your trigger will look like. When you're done, you can just set your trigger and then disable your mesh renderer. When navigating around your project window, if you're not finding what you need to find, like scenes for example, I know I have more scenes than this, so I can just go to my root folder and I'll put T: for type and then just scene, for example. It should pull up all the scenes from all the folders. Now the easiest way I found to add a script or create a script, especially if you know what game object you want it on, is to select your game object, hit add component, we'll call this new test script, and you hit enter twice. It'll add your test script and you'll be ready to modify it. You can lock the inspector, that way it doesn't select other items. Let's say I have a test script and I have an array on it. I could lock it, and instead of dragging the objects in one by one, I could select all these objects, move it into the cubes. I have all the cubes in the array. Sometimes while testing, you need to change values in a script to get it working just right. So let's say I change these around, and this is the way I want it. Most of you know that if you stop play mode, these are going to get reset. A useful way to go about this is to set your values to what you want. You can go here and click copy component. So now when you hit stop, you can go back and hit paste component values. Another good use for the copy component is, let's say I put this on the wrong object and I wanted it on go pick up 1. I already have all the values set, so if I went to go pick up 1 and hit add component and added this script, it has the preset values. So I could just go into go pick up and I could copy the component values, go over here and hit paste component values. and then now I have all these on the new game object. There's even a better way to do this. If I wanted this on there, I could just drag this script, drop it on there, and just like that, it adds it here and also removes it here. And touching on this one last thing, let's say that I've changed all these values. You can go into my script and see that these are the defaults. So instead of copying all these over to all these new fields, I could just hit these 3 dots and I can go to reset. Let's say you have a bunch of gizmos on your character. You don't want to disable all the gizmos, but you want to get rid of all these that are making it hard to see. So one thing that's pretty easy to do is to go into your character and collapse the components, and every component you collapse will get rid of that particular gizmo. If you don't have a collection of frequently used scripts, you should. They help out tremendously. Instead of going to Unity, find any script and opening it when you need it, simply go to View, Solution Explorer, and expand your asset script files, and you can just bounce around from one file to another. You can have Unity find your assets from a different drive if you're having storage troubles. We can do this by using what they call a symbolic link. So here you see I have my C drive, here is a K drive, but I have 2 folders. This one is linked to this one. So if I open this one and I go over here and I create a new folder, I call this a new asset, what's going to happen is over here I'm also going to have a folder called new asset. When I delete this folder, it deletes from here too. If you're still using this blind editor, I don't know why. Go to Preferences, go to General, and Editor Theme, change it to dark. It's free now. There's no reason why. When prototyping your UI, use a white pixel for your source image. It makes prototyping your UI a lot easier. One thing I like to do is have public Booleans, especially if I'm working on a character controller or something. It makes it super easy to debug. So if I go in here and hit play, you can watch them all in real time as they're working. Now I know that's not the best way. Now if I do like I should and make the ones private that need to be private, now my Booleans have disappeared. I can't really debug using them like I did before. But if I go up here and hit debug on my inspector, all of a sudden all these Booleans are now visible. Now let's say I didn't want to use the debug. You can see here I only have 2 variables public. So if I go back into my script, you can see that's these. But we can use serialized field before the variable, and this will make it so these are now visible again in the inspector. Now let's say on the opposite side of the spectrum I have these 2 public Booleans. What if I didn't want them visible in the inspector? I could also go hide in inspector. Let's go in here. They're gone. Sometimes your scripts grow a little big, and sometimes it could be a little unorganized. So to clean up the script a little, we could go in here and we could use this attribute called header, and we can type in something like integers, and we copy paste this, and this could be called Booleans, and then this could be called floats, and then everything that follows will be in their own category. So if we save this, we can go back in here, we have a little bit more organization. Another one to use is tooltip. So if like you wanted to know what this specific bool does, you could put tooltip up before it and say this bool does this. And if we hit save and go back, now when we hover over this bool, it'll say this bool does this. Another great attribute for cleaning up your inspector is the space. So these bools do something different than these, but no matter how we space them in the code, they're going to be lined up. But if we use the space attribute, and I hit save, now we can go into Unity and we can clearly see that there's a space between the bools. And the final attribute I'm going to talk about is one that I don't see a whole lot, but let's say this integer 1 can only be between, let's just say it can only be between 0 and 20. We can have a range, and in this range we'll type in 0 to 20. We can now see that this is an integer, but it can only go from 0 to 20. Another thing I don't see utilized enough is this onDraw Gizmo selected, which can help you tremendously. So let's say this object has a radius and it's going to do something with that radius. So down here in our onDraw Gizmo selected, we can just say gizmos.color equals color.green, and then we can use gizmos.draw wiresphere, and we'll use transform.position as our starting point, and then we'll just pass in the radius float as our radius. So now if we select this game object, we start messing with our radius, we can see this sphere drawn. In Unity, debugs are a powerful tool. Everybody knows this debug.log. But did you also know that there's these two additional debugs that are very useful? So this is a debug log error and a debug.log warning. So now if we hit save and go back into Unity and hit play, we'll see we have a normal debug, an error debug, and a warning debug. Now most people that use Unity know that you can debug strings and variables at the same time. So here we could say, if we wanted to print out this, we could say debug.log, and then we could say cat owner's name plus space has space plus number of cats plus space cats, and this will debug Billy has 10 cats. An easier way since then I found to do this is if you put the $sign in front of your quotations. Now we can just say has cats, and we can use these brackets to put in cat owner's name, number of cats. We can go into Unity and run this, and it should debug the same thing. Another great debug is the break debug. So let's just say we're running code, and for now I'm just going to use input.getKey down space. But let's just say this is part of your code. You can say debug.break, and now anytime this debug gets called, what's going to happen? It's going to pause the editor. We all know debugs are great, but sometimes a debug needs to grab your attention. You can add color to your debug by using color equals green and then closing off the color. We can go into Unity and we'll see that this debug now has a nice green color. Calling certain functions in your game is sometimes vital, especially if you're debugging. So what I see a lot of people do is in the update loop, they'll just bind a key to it, and then they'll say run the test function. It'll work, but I'm going to show you a different way. Use the context menu. So right above your function that you want to run, you just put context menu, and we'll say run test function. So if we were to play this and then we click run test function, it's it's going to call that function. Another way we could do this is we could make this static. Up here at the top, we'll say using Unity Editor. And then now above the function, we can say menu item. We say window / run test function. We can hit play. And then now we can go to window and run test function. Now we're going to end with my most favorite way, and that's because it's so hacky. At the top, we can say public Boolean, and we're going to call this run test function. And then in the void update, we'll say if run test function, then we want to call the test function, and then we want to set the Boolean back to false. Now if we go into Unity and hit play, we'll see this run test function, and when we click it, it will run the test function. Well, that was it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe.